correspondent Nick Holdsworth can join us now from the conference. Hello to you, Nick. So on Saturday, we heard from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He said the U.S. and Europe belong together. He called for revitalizing that alliance, though he never apologized for Donald Trump's calls to annex Greenland or at times Trump's harsh criticisms of Europe. Will we hear a response from the Europeans today?
Yes, we certainly have already begun to hear that response today. In fact, the focus of the Munich Security Conference today is on Europe. And the first speech this morning given by Kaja Kallas, the European Union foreign policy chief, and she says, well, yeah, of course Europe understands it has challenges. For sure, we need reforms. We need to strengthen our defences, our security, our markets, and our commonality. She was speaking on a panel that was looking at EU agency in a rougher world. And she spoke about the Russian threat and then said that actually the priority of Europe is to defend itself against the Russian threat by expanding, enlargement, bringing more countries into the European fold, increasing its security, and building strong international partnerships to support free trade. And turning to the speech by the American Secretary of State yesterday morning, Marco Rubio, she said that she gets fed up with all this European bash, and she goes around the world, and everywhere she goes she understands that European values on human rights, on the international legal order, etc., are the ones that are valued around the world. And she said that it's quite hard to take criticism from somebody like herself from Estonia, who comes from a country where the country ranks number 2 on the World Press Freedom Index. It's quite hard to take criticism from America, which ranks 58th on that same index.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of Americans aren't even aware of that, Nick. How is the conference going this year compared to previous editions?
Well, we've had a big focus, of course, on Russia. The elephant in the room, which is the symbol of the conference this year, the elephant in the room being the all-out attack that seems to be coming from all quarters on the international legal and economic and geopolitical world order. Of course, there's been a big focus on Russia. And we had this trademark speech yesterday from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who dubbed Vladimir Putin a slave to war. Came in the middle of his speech, but I think that is how that speech is going to go down in history. Vladimir Putin, a slave to war. Zelensky talked about how the war had evolved, how the Russians had evolved their drones from early, very primitive models to jet-powered ones now, but also how the Americans and the Europeans had eventually come up with the goods that the Ukrainians need, the missiles they need to shoot down now, on average 90% of those drones. And Zelensky again put out that plea for Ukrainian membership both of the EU and of NATO, but he added, let's not leave it up to Vladimir Putin to decide who becomes a member of NATO. Let NATO decide it itself. So strong words, standing ovations, and a very important speech as that war in Ukraine approaches its 4th anniversary in just 10 days' time. And the other amazing revelation that came here in Munich, not out of the conference but on the sidelines, announced by the British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper alongside the widow of Alexei Navalny, was that the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny had been poisoned with an exotic form of frog poison that's only found on the Ecuadorian dart frog in the wild. It was found in his bloodstream. It took a couple of years and 5 European nations doing the research to find out that he had been poisoned with this extremely exotic poison. They say that is firm evidence that Vladimir Putin, that the Russians murdered one of their own people in contravention of the Chemical Weapons Treaty, of which Russia is a signatory, and using this exotic poison. Now, this to me, as an old Russia hand, does smack of the KGB, now known as the FSB, the Federal Security Service, to use such an exotic poison, one which they knew would be very, very hard to trace, very hard to actually ascertain. That has all the hallmarks of a KGB operation, and it's the first time that anyone has actually formally, any government has formally accused the Kremlin of actually murdering Alexei Navalny, who died just 2 years ago. Tomorrow is the second anniversary of his death.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Holdsworth reporting from Munich, also our former Russian correspondent, so he knows what he's talking about there. Thank you, Nick.